Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mallory Findlay, and I'm a scholar advisor at the foundation. You might not know that I'm also a PhD student in English at UNC, and I am a certified professional life coach. That is a certification I got a few years ago when I was studying for my comprehensive exams because I wanted to strengthen the way that I was able to have conversations with students. Um, and it's proved to be extremely valuable both in my professional life and in my personal life. So the purpose of this presentation today is just to share a couple of coaching techniques with mentors and mentees so that you all can have more powerful conversations. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first technique that I'm going to talk about today is what we call empowering open-ended questions. The basis of coaching is that each of us is the expert of our own lives. We're all creative people, we're all resourceful people. We all have an abundance of experience that has taught us to navigate difficulty and take inspired action. And so coaching techniques in general are sort of geared around drawing out that personal expertise on the assumption that we have that personal expertise. And so this first technique is really meant to sort of bring out a lot of that. So I should say, there's a time and a place definitely for asking for advice, giving advice, sharing stories from your own life, just kind of, going back and forth like that. Um, but in a situation when you really want to try to problem solve together or go deep on a dilemma that somebody's having, a really powerful open-ended question can be a great way to do that. So what is an empowering open-ended question? It's a question that does not presume a specific or correct answer. It's phrased in such a way, open-ended, that allows the respondent to formulate their own thoughts based on their own lived experience and expertise. And like I said, it's not always where you want to go. Sometimes someone really does just want advice from you and wants to be told, like, what did you do in this situation? But um, in times when someone's trying to navigate, their own life and you're not really sure, you don't want to presume that you know the answer, this is a really good technique to use. So you can see a couple of examples there on the slide. What did you learn from that? What's the main challenge here? What makes that important for you? A lot of open-ended empowering questions start with either what or how. That sort of opens it up, lets the listener or the respondent, respond in the way that is appropriate to them and kind of forces them to think through it. Sometimes you'll see open-ended empowering questions that start with why, but the word why, when you start a question with it, can sometimes make the brain go a little bit into defensive mode. If you can imagine someone asking you, like, why did you do that? You're sort of like, oh, why did I? So we tend to encourage people to start their open-ended questions with what or how. It's a little gentler. So why are these kinds of questions valuable? They are challenging, they're thought-provoking, they inspire the respondent to consider new possibilities. They build on wisdom that the respondent already possesses, which is extremely empowering when you use your own wisdom and expertise to make choices and decisions. Which leads to further self-trust, which is huge, resilience, creativity, imagination. You develop the sense in answering these questions that anything can be figured out, and you have the creativity and resources to figure things out with the help of the person who you're talking to. So extremely valuable just for building confidence and trust in oneself, and resilience, just helping someone navigate their own life. I want to point out that a clarifying question is a little bit different, and it's often a really good follow-up to an open-ended empowering question. So basically you're going to ask if the respondent says something, um, you're going to ask them to explain and define their terms, which they may or may not have already done for themselves. It's best not to assume that you know or understand what someone means just because they're using common terms or terms you've heard before, even terms you've used in your own life. Remembering that everyone's life experience gives them a different take. So asking for clarification can lead to increased meaning and understanding, a deeper conversation for both parties. People often have breakthroughs in my coaching experience when they're asked to clarify what they mean. One example I've seen before is like someone says, "I'm really looking for more balance in my life." Rather than assuming you know what that means based on what balance means to you, if you ask, well, what does balance mean to you? What would that look like? And suddenly the person realizes that they haven't really thought it through. And by trying to articulate what it means for them, they actually end up making a plan for themselves by talking it out, for like bringing a little more balance into their life on terms which might be different from your terms. Um, so, a clarifying question can just be like, tell me more what you mean when you say, or, when you use the word balance, what does that mean for you? Just asking people to define their terms. So before I move on to the second piece of the presentation, I want to point out, if you've never sort of had conversations like this where you're really focusing on asking open-ended questions, um, be prepared. One thing that might happen, because answer or questions like this don't have easy answers, they can't be answered with a yes or a no, is that you might get some silence. We love silence. You need to be comfortable with silence. Don't try to fill it. Don't rephrase your question unless the person says, "Can you ask that in a different way? I don't really understand what you meant." Um, sit in the silence and let the person think. Um, Additionally, as a respondent, if you've never been asked a powerful open-ended question, you might feel stumped when you first get asked. You might even feel resistant to answering it. I would encourage you to sit with that feeling, trust what comes up for you, be willing to talk it through, even if your initial response is, "I don't know." I've been on both sides of this as a coach and someone getting coached. It can be really uncomfortable to be asked a question where you really don't know the answer because you haven't really thought it through, but kind of riding that wave together and being okay with that and stumbling through an answer is kind of what we want here. We want you to stumble onto answers for yourself. So all you have to do to find examples of open-ended empowering questions is do a quick Google search of just that phrase, and you'll come up with pages and pages and pages of examples. Lots of coaching companies and coaches have them on the internet. So I encourage you to do a little search and see what comes up, see if any might be relevant to you in your own conversations. So, second technique that I want to talk about today, a really obvious part of having a good conversation, but maybe not so obvious if you haven't really thought about it before, is listening. And so in coaching, we kind of talk about 3 levels of listening. They're all useful in different ways. So I'm going to kind of talk through and show you what I mean. So what we call level 1 listening is subjective listening. It's subjective to the listener. So this looks like, whenever what is said is heard through the experiences and the autobiography of the listener, or as it relates to the listener. It's often based on the agenda of the listener. You're listening to respond. It's If the speaker is looking for understanding or connection, it's rarely very satisfying to them. So essentially what it's saying, as you can see there on the slide, is something similar happened to me. So, if somebody says like, "I had a really tough time waking up this morning with my alarm," and the listener responds with something like, well, you just put your alarm on the other side of the bedroom. That's what I do, and it works for me. You're kind of presuming that your autobiographical experiences will have relevance for the person you're talking to. And that's not always true. Sometimes it is true, but not always. So that's level one. It's appropriate sometimes, but not all the time. Level two listening is what we call objective listening. This is when the listener is focused on the speaker and not thinking about their own experience. And it can be effective, but it doesn't always really get to the heart of the matter. Essentially, objective listening just shows that, you can repeat back to the speaker what you heard. You're responding very neutrally. So like with the alarm example, you just be like, oh, that sounds really hard. I'm sorry that you struggled to get up this morning. You heard what they said, that's all. Can be useful in certain situations, but in coaching, what we strive to do is level 3 listening, which is intuitive listening. This is when the listener is tuned in to all sensory components of the conversation. So not only what the speaker says, but how they say it, their tone, their energy, the context that they're in, the subtext, reading between the lines. This is really the most powerful form of listening, and it helps to foster a really deep connection. And if you get really good at it, you can often hear someone saying something even if they can't hear it themselves, because you're kind of paying attention to the entire context. So like with the alarm example, you might say something like, it sounds like waking up with your alarm with ease is a really important goal of yours. But it sounds like something is holding you back. That must be really frustrating. What do you think's going on there? You've kind of addressed all sides of whatever the person just said to you. So, quick final note on being a good listener. Probably the two most important skills that we learn in coaching are how to acknowledge and how to validate. If you do nothing at all, and if you just do these two things, you will see, if you're not already, a vast improvement in both your professional and your personal relationships. A lot of times this is all we want from our conversations and from other people. So acknowledging just means mirroring or paraphrasing back to someone what they just said so they know you got it. So you just say like, what I hear you saying is, and you kind of like re-articulate what they said. It's really nice to feel understood in that way. And then validation just means letting someone know that they have the right to feel the way they do. Given the circumstances, anyone in your shoes would feel that way. Variations on that kind of phrase. You're not judging, you're not agreeing, you're not disagreeing. You're just saying, I understand exactly where you're coming from. It makes sense for you that you would feel that way, given everything that's going on. So I'm going to stop my screen share here and just say that's it for now. If you've been practicing with skills like that before, they should come really naturally to you. But if you've never tried having a conversation with open-ended empowering questions or deep levels of listening, it does take practice, but I think it is a really worthy practice to get better at and to strive for, to have better conversations. Like I said, it's not always relevant. Sometimes you just kind of want advice and that's it. And I think that's really useful and valuable too. But for those times when you're working through a dilemma or trying to goal set, things like that, those can be really useful tools. So I hope that was useful to you. I'm so excited that everyone's getting to do this mentoring program. It sounds like it's going really well. And I will leave it there for now. Thanks.